And greetings. Don't you love that voice? And we all hear it all the time on Zoom. My name is Mike Blinder, and I am honored to be your host today, your moderator. And if you don't know who I am the publisher of E&P, Editor and Publisher Magazine. And this is one of our sponsored webinars where we allow our marketing partners to bring in some case studies, and hopefully we all can have a good, healthy dialogue for the next 60 minutes on the various different topics that impact this amazingly fun yet challenging media industry. Quick housekeeping. I mentioned the word Zoom. If you don't know what Zoom is, you're living under a rock. Somehow over the course of the last few years, it became the pretty much go-to meeting platform that we're all using now. But this is not Zoom meeting, this is Zoom webinar. We have had over 150 register for this event today. So there's going to be a lot of people coming and going and attending, which means you're not going to be able to speak. You're going to be able to watch and listen and interact with us through something on the bottom of your screen called chat. Don't raise your hand. Someone already did that because we don't know what that means. And please don't go to Q&A. We're simply going to keep all our eyes on a chat room today. Now, here's the thing that Zoom does. And I don't know why, but they always default the chat room to panelist only, which means if you don't click that panelist blue thing and switch it to attendees and panelists, your message will only go to the panel. And I'd really prefer if we made this an open dialogue for all, because someone else who's attending may want to comment or give you a link or some information as well. In other words, we like to make this just an exchange of ideas and information. So now that I've taken the first 1 minute, I'd like to bring in my auspicious panel, if I may, and get them to introduce themselves to you. And from time to time throughout this webinar as well, some other members of Legacycom may chime in. And I think that'll be great so we can get more input and more information that we need. But first of all, with your kind permission, let me first introduce Ms. Sally Steed. I know that's an old expression that ladies first, but Sally, I can't remember if you and I ever met face-to-face over my 25 years in the industry and the various conferences I've attended. But you are currently down in Utah at Deseret, correct, ma'am?
I am. I've been here about 18 years, and you're right, Mike. I don't think we've met. This is our first encounter, one of many to come, I hope.
I hope so as well. Sally, if I may just, you've been at Utah Media Group for a long time, since 2007, but you've held various titles. Today, your title is Sales Director for Deseret News. Is that correct? Does that mean you totally focus only on that platform? Because Deseret has a lot of, you got broadcast, you've got the digital services division, you've got the content division. Where do you sit? How big is your bandwidth there? What are your duties?
I oversee anything that is sold there. So it covers a plethora of different products, anything from a direct mailed, direct service product to a business magazine, to the newspaper, to the .com. We have a lot of things. So anything that sells.
All right. So, and how could, just for those that don't know who Deseret Media is, how big is the team? How large is the audience that you're managing there?
Sales wise on Deseret News specifically, we house about 27 salespeople. Okay.
And what's the audience overall, circ on the traditional legacy product and with the digital?
Total print product about 85,000 between our Friday and Saturday product.
And how about direct unique visitors on the online? Would that be what are we?
Right in the area of 13 million, right around there. And it varies, obviously.
It's a pretty large operation, in other words, with a vast audience. And it's not just local, correct me if I'm wrong, you have an audience worldwide as well, because you are owned through a partnership with the Church of Latter-day Saints, correct?
That's correct. 60% of our audience online is outside of Utah. So we have a very national audience along with a good local audience.
That's great. Now, Michael, you and I have met before, sir. Michael, your official title is VP of Inside Sales at Advanced Local. But I looked at your pedigree and it'll make you sound very old because you look very young to me. You spent 3 years at USA Today. You had 6 months at Angie's List, which I really want to hear about sometime, but that's not on in this platform, maybe. You were at Digital First Media, did a stint at Yahoo, you were at Media General, you worked at Maggot, and of course you were back at Knight Ridder, KR, in 1995 before anyone knew what the internet was. Do I have that correct? I mean, it's pretty big background.
That's a pretty good, yeah, it keeps going before that too, but those are the high points.
Now, what do you do now as head of inside sales at Advance?
So I have the pleasure of working on a couple of different teams, from retail through traditional classifieds, of which, of course, the obituaries tends to be one of my favorites.
All right, and talk to me about Advance itself, just so those that may not understand what Advance is and what Advance Local is, the girth of your company. I mean, how many properties are we talking, and audience?
Yeah, so Advance Local, which is really the news and information, the local news and information arm of Advance Publications, the larger company. Advance Publications would include things like Condé Nast, American City Business Journal, and a whole bunch of other interesting businesses. Within our Advance Local group, we are 15 news and information websites, 26 newspapers, and our reach, we would say, is about 55 million people every month. So you may know us as NJ.com on the East Coast, or maybe Oregon Live on the West Coast, and many of the iconic newspaper brands like the Cleveland Plain Dealer, or the Plain Dealer of Cleveland, the Birmingham News in Alabama. So some well-known and long-lived publications, and we hope for a lot longer.
Correct me if I'm wrong, you are New York based, am I correct, sir?
Yes.
Okay.
Mhm.
Stauffer, I don't remember ever shaking your hand or running into you at a conference or what have you, but your background is most impressive. 10 years at McKinsey, and then you founded Legacy. That was this is your baby, sir, this company, correct?
That's sort of right too. And nonetheless, I feel like we've known each other forever, by the way, Mike. So just so you know, based on the couple minutes we chatted earlier, and it's pronounced Stouffer, by the way,
Stauffer.
Which is, look, I have to live with the fact that I've got a kind of a different name. So I explain it often. Yes, it's a baby. Here's what it means. I just want to share. I got to tell you, I woke up this morning like with a spring in my step, and it's not because it's 15 degrees outside in Chicago. By the way, this is really Chicago back there, right? It's because yeah, I mean, at a young age, and now for the past couple of decades, I wake up each day. I go to bed each night and wake up each morning thinking about the obituary category, as do many of my colleagues, right? So it is a special day when I wake up and know that we're going to be able to have a group of really smart people talking about a category that we really care about and I think about every day for the last 2 decades. So thanks for having us.
You surprised the industry, at least surprised me, sir, and I think many, when just about a year ago, it was not that long ago, where Legacy picked up Ancestry and the various divisions. I mean, my first question is AdPay. I mean, why, if we get to the parent companies now, I mean, iPublish took over AdPay. Can you talk to me a little bit about that? Because that was an amazing move. It made you guys huge, but what was the background of it? What was the rationale behind that, sir?
Yeah, I mean, the way we like to look at it, first of all, because of our position, we have this really unique vantage point to see emerging trends in the industry, right? And so we've been following, 4 such trends. It looks like you put them up here on the screen. That's wonderful, right? And what are they? Baby boomers are aging and deaths are going to rise for years to come, right? Number 2, cremation rates are increasing and more consumers need to do it themselves sometimes without the help of a funeral director. People are more transient than ever, and they're also more, digital-centric, right, than ever. So they do stuff online. So we realize that these trends represented a growth opportunity for everybody, for the industry, but also an existential threat if, depending on how we and our newspaper partners reacted to these trends. So our position, our view is that newspapers need to get this right, not just to maintain the historic revenue from the category, but also maintain a critical driver of newspaper readership. It was essential that we react to these trends in the right way. So part of that was identifying best practices to grow the obituary category. And by the way, they're included in a wonderful white paper that Kim Saffron, who's here today, and I suspect others on this call will talk about today in different ways, right? But one of these best practices was to ensure that private party obituaries are incredibly easy and convenient to place for anyone, anywhere, okay? So we felt so strongly about this that we thought we needed to take action and leadership to make sure it happened. So really what happened, this happened over the last couple of years, Mike. We acquired iPublish and AdPay. And our vision of this was that the best possible solution was a combination of these two entities working collaboratively together with Legacy investing as well. And we are fortunate to be able to make those acquisitions, and here we are today, right? So I feel great about the fact that we and our partners are in the best possible position to address this sort of best practice by this combination we formed, and it's going to continue to get better.
Stouffer, how big is the company now, and how many media properties are you serving at this time? Because it's got to be huge by this, you've got a big organization there.
Yeah, I mean, because our family of companies now, which include iPublish and AdPay, and also a couple companies that help us connect with the funeral industry as well, that we've in the same time period we acquired because we thought that was very important too. We've got about 300 employees across now 5 different sort of entities, locations. What was the other?
How many media partners are you working with right now?
Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds.
Okay. It's pretty hard to find.
And actually, at the end of the day, probably thousands. But it's we don't think about it that way. I got to tell you, I learned this from a funeral director friend of mine a long time ago. He said, I don't think about how many families I serve. I think about each one of them and how I make, how I serve each one of them the best. And I've sort of taken it to heart, and which is why I can't answer questions like that off the top of my head. How many do we have?
I would venture a guess, though, it'd be hard to find a property that it does not in some way, shape, form, or size have some connection to, either through the local funeral home or through the various different services you provide. But one of the things that I found fascinating about this is when we were doing all the prep and I started reading the beginnings of this white papers, I was learning a heck of a lot that I did not know, because I'm an old guy. I'm going to say this too, because I'm now going to bring back in Sally. I've been around for a long time. I remember my first encounter as a newspaper employee. I was brought in obliquely to the Portland, Maine Press Herald because I was running a radio group to help them start their online division in 1999. And I went into this massive classified department with like 100 people in a room and lights, cameras, and everything going, and bells and whistles. And it was classifieds, classifieds, classifieds. And and the two didn't meet. And somehow obituaries got packed into that space way back then. And in some media companies, Sally, I see you nodding your head. In some media companies, it's still there. And the whole purpose of this webinar is not to sell a product or service. It's to educate on the importance, correct me if I'm wrong, of this critical content. So Sally, what is your opinion? What are you guys doing at your company in order to feature this content, and why is it important? Give us the elevator pitch, if I may ask.
Sure. Well, I mean, first and foremost, classified died years ago to me. I started in classified and dearly loved it, but print classified died years ago. And if you're not paying attention to that, you're 10 steps behind. You can't ignore the way people like to get information these days. And it's definitely not, if I'm looking for a job, I don't go to the paper most of the time to look for a recruitment. I'm going to go to a monster.com. If I want to buy a car, I'm going to get online and search. And obituaries are no different. But content is king. With the newspaper, one of the pieces that remain the strongest piece of content that people look for is obituaries. If you're not playing on that and the whole memorial theme, then you're missing an important piece of content, in my opinion. It's a standalone. It's not a grouped product.
All right. So basically, you're trying to be then the one place that your audience goes. Am I correct?
That's correct.
Because they want this content. I mean, okay, you've heard the term hyperlocal, hyperlocal, hyperlocal. What's more local than obit, right? I mean, what's
right.
Like a birth or a wedding?
And to be honest, it used to be, on the newspaper would drive them to look online at obituary in a lot of cases. But rather, we're in a case now where online will drive them to go and get a newspaper to hopefully save a copy of the obituary. So if you're not online, if you're not everywhere they're looking, you're not going to be the top in your game. Okay, so
Michael, being the one-stop solution, how is that in your world right now? How are you looking at obituaries at Advance, And how are you making sure that this content is now featured so more people can find it and benefit from it?
Sure. There's a couple of ways that we've approached this. One of the biggest things that we've jumped into, and I think we'll talk about it as we go, but we decided that this trend where we started to see people placing their obits on social and places beyond on the funeral home sites. These are needs that the market was talking to us about, and so one of those really big things we've done is pushed out much more of a social solution, so that families don't have to go to Facebook and publish the obituary, and funeral homes don't have to go and do that on behalf of families. It's really, and this was something that we worked on with our partners at iPublish to roll out in late 2020. But it was a really strategic way for us to say, hey, we get it. Social is becoming a way that many people are looking for news, information, family information, memorialization. And we wanted to be part of that and get ahead. And so that was critical. You'll also see, I think you've got kind of the recap of the deaths from a quarterly publication standpoint that we've done, again, with our partners at iPublish. I think it's the one under the death notices on the slide there. That we call it our tribute section or our memorial section. It's a recap that we do in the newspaper on a quarterly basis. That allows us to really continue to serve a function as the place where you can find this information. These are things that family members, funeral homes like to tuck away. They want to keep that. So we are doing all the things on this slide that you see. And we're even doing things with, we've got a great partner that provides a plaque back to the family with a copy of the obit. For us, those kinds of strategies are enabling us to really make sure that we're part of that ritual of end of life, and kind of trying to expand that to get beyond just the actual the event itself.
Sal, I remember way back when I entered that newspaper building, and I was tasked with helping get content online. I mean, this was my mission, and make friends in this building. The obituary content was handled by the sales department, by one dude who was in charge of all classifieds, and editorial had nothing to do with this. How are you blending the culture now? Is this how, if I were to sit down with your editor at Deseret, do they see the value of this content? Are you working with them in tandem? Are we like all holding hands and singing Kumbaya?
Absolutely, they see it. We now have what's called the memorial pages, rather than just obituary pages that are going to feature everything from editorial written by our staff to advertorial that is placed by a client. So it's all in one section, and they also see it as content that is very valuable these days.
Michael, same question to you, especially since you're in charge of a sales division, online sales. Are you part of those meetings with editorial? Because I know you've got the chops. You've been in this industry for years, and you just don't want to make money. You want these brands you're in charge of to survive for decades to come. Am I right, sir? And so how do you get that? How do you get the editorial team behind you as you're looking at these trends, this data, this world we're in now?
Well, I think it's interesting. The intersection tends to be for us with our, I would call it our product and our sort of technology team that's managing our customer relationship. You see it on the screen here, mobile. Mobile is such an important part of the way people are accessing this information that, any change or issue with the way we're delivering that just spirals into a ton of feedback. These are the same folks who read the newspaper every single day, picked it up, had it home delivered. They are now on our mobile devices and our apps. And so what we're doing is, I would say we interface a lot more from the sales side with that group that is managing that interface, the relationship there, and really making sure that the content is there, easy to use, downloading, and all the various issues that happen with browsers and updates and iOS and all of that. We tend to keep a very close relationship there to make sure that we're serving and getting that information out to our our readers.
Stouffer, during the pregame for this, I kept saying, because I'm a sales guy and this is a sponsored webinar, I kept saying, all right, what's product you want to push? And all I kept hearing back from your team was that we're not selling anything, we're shifting a paradigm. I mean, we want people to understand how valuable this content is. Do it with us, do it with someone, but make sure that this content doesn't get buried as some of, like, so I could go to 100 small newspaper sites right now, and I would have to dig deep to find the obits, right? I'd have to go up into a navigation bar and start clicking around, and then I'd find some, maybe just some PDF of what was in the paper. Do you see that in the entire industry now, or do you see people understanding that this is really about content that we need to maintain?
You know what? It's a little bit of both, Mike. And that's why these conversations are so valuable. And that's why the team answered your question probably the way they did. Because the most important thing that can come out of this is that our partners realize that this content, I mean, in terms of our partners, newspapers remaining relevant and growing and prospering, this local content is probably one of the most important pieces of local content that they and we have. And it's so important, it's treated as such. And I will tell you, it varies across the board from folks who put it right out front to others who, quite frankly, hide it. And I got to tell you, if you're a publisher today, I'd be thinking two things. I'd be thinking, one, am I making it as easy as possible for funeral homes and consumers to publish content on my site and in my newspaper? And number two, am I making it as easy as possible for everybody anywhere to discover that content and to consume it and to be reminded every day, the newspaper is where I go for this kind of content and where I will publish an obituary when it's time.
It's amazing. One of my close friends in the industry I've known for 25 years, Janet DeGeorge, is in our chat room now. And Janet, lives, breathes, and eats these verticals, these content areas. And she just wrote, obits are history, caps, and newspapers must respect that. This is so true. Just like birth announcements, weddings, this is, and I'm a nerd. I've always looked at traffic reports. I've consulted hundreds of media companies around the world. Obits gets a lot of traffic. People want to, they want to absorb this content. So let's now turn to the next topic. Let's assume in a perfect world, and that we've convinced the over 100 people now in our audience that they have to treat this content with respect. It's not advertising. It's content, period. It's got to come together with advertising and editorial. So let's talk about today and the future. Let's circle back now, if I may, to Sally. What is the future with media? I mean, you still respect print at Deseret. I know. I still respect print at E&P, but that's not our only channel, right? I mean, we got to start thinking multi-channel, correct?
That's correct. I think you have to pay attention not only to how you think people want to receive their news. People ask me that all the time. You've got to pay attention to how we are being trained to receive news. As a society, we all look to things like Facebook, LinkedIn. We're searching our mobile all day long. Find a meeting where somebody isn't madly searching their mobile right before the meeting. We're used to looking at a mobile phone, and 60%, 70% of news is now read on a mobile. So if your obituaries aren't also on the mobile and featured in that area where we're being trained to look, it's a problem. And that's where we're focusing. Are we everywhere that people look? Are we on their social media? Are we on their apps on their phones? Our app features our obituaries. It's all important to us.
And I know that the technology exists to take each piece of this content and make it a channel agnostic, move it to any different channel. Am I right? Am I right, Stouffer? I mean, it's not, if you have the right technology behind you, that's not the challenge anymore, right? The challenge is just doing it, making the shift. Am I correct, sir?
I think the challenge is the mindset.
It really is.
And
because I mean, I know your tools allow anyone to put this content in social media, on anywhere they want. But they have to sit down and accept the content. How about you, Michael? I got a great quote from you. I mean, you fed it to us in advance, but what's your opinion of how, what was that famous hockey player, Wayne Gretzky, said, skating to where the puck is going? I mean, what is your thoughts on that?
Oh, 100%. That's what we're dealing now with what was on the horizon just a few years ago. These things are having an impact already on the business, on the way we distribute this. So We're laying plans. We've taken some actions that we can talk about just to prepare for these things. You saw those trends that Stouffer was outlining. Those are real things that are going to have an impact. And if you're not getting active in planning for that, then as Sally said, you're going to get left sort of behind, and along with what we've seen with a lot of the other verticals. So we are taking an active role in thinking about, and I borrow from our friends at Legacy who talk often about digital memorialization and kind of expanding beyond the end of life event. We're looking at that population shift. What's it mean? How are we going to serve that new audience? And how are we going to serve that audience in the changing dynamics of the publishing business? Whereas, a lot of this is still, a lot of our revenue, a lot of our infrastructure is built around the print product. As that begins to shift, how do we make sure that we're securing a digital, a future for ourselves digitally?
All right, so the first step of this meeting, because I try to, is to first just have everyone accept the fact that this content is critical. If we let it go by the wayside, like we let other content go over the years, we may never get it back, and we'll lose more eyeballs, which makes it hard to finance a newsroom to do our other chores, which is, reporting and what have you. The second thing was that the technology exists, and you've got to skate to where the puck is going when it comes to the platforms that people are now using. So let's move on to the data. Perfect segue, Michael, and I'm going to swing it back, if I may, to Stouffer. Okay, we promised this audience, we teased them that you were going to release some stuff for us. You got a white paper people have access to after this webinar, but give me the cook's tour. What is going on now when it comes to this critical category that we got to look at and make sure we're serving it properly, Stouffer?
Yeah, I'd love to pass that to Kim and the team, because they worked so hard pulling this together, and we're authored a great white paper. So I'd like to pass it to my colleagues.
Come on, guys. We have some in the background. Who do we have here?
You've got Kim and Ernie here, and happy to talk about it. I mean, we're doing a lot of things, and I think that it goes back to those trends that you and Stouffer talked about in the beginning. So working with our newspapers to make sure that paid obituaries are featured prominently and easy to find on the website and on mobile sites near any editorial obituaries, making sure that it's easy to do self-service, working with our partners on crematorium strategies and reaching out to crematoriums as we see giant growth in crematoriums, and providing a lot more opportunities for obituaries to be featured in more than one market. With the coming trends in baby boomers aging into, unfortunately, the age where they pass away, and then their children being the ones who are going to be placing obituaries, we're looking at the first generation of people that didn't get born and die in the same place. This is the first time we've really looked at people who grew up somewhere, they went to college somewhere, but they moved a couple times in their lives, and their kids are even more transient. So multi-market's very important, and we're doing a lot of work with both targeted obituaries on Facebook as well as with ad pay memoriams to make multi-market placement that much easier for everybody.
Well, let's unpack some of that.
I was going to say, Kim, can you comment a little bit on the cremation rates and some of what we're seeing, surprising numbers with respect to the amount of private placement going on?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, cremation is already the preferred method in the United States. And according to the National Funeral Directors Association, and many of you know this on a state-by-state basis, in some cases, the crematoriums are owned by the funeral homes. They just provide a lower price point and a different set of services. They are less traditionally involved with the placement of obituaries. And then in other states, and just in general, there are independent crematoriums that have nothing to do with funeral homes and nothing to do, frankly, with our newspapers. So we have to reach out and figure out ways to work with them. I think the third thing that we forget as newspaper people, we all know that obituaries are part of our paid but important local content. I think if you ask the general person on the street, they don't necessarily realize that they're even a paid product. They think it's all editorial. So continuing to educate people on, hey, would you like to see, your loved one memorialized in your local paper, online, on legacy.com, et cetera, just click this button to do so and educate it and make it easy for them to do that.
Ernie, what would you like to add, sir?
Well, I think on the cremation point, Mike, one thing that is important to understand too, it goes back to the whole idea we've been talking about, that during the session, which is obits are really interesting and engaging content, right? And yet, as people are planning for a cremation and making those arrangements, right? Sometimes the obituary doesn't even factor into how those services are being arranged, because typically the person arranging that thinks it's really expensive to put in a newspaper, right? Rather than thinking about, hey, the importance of having a life story, or at least a glimpse at someone's life story. And then when you think about how to distribute over time that can go online. It doesn't have to be as expensive. Like it's an important trend. The slide I got the most out of was really the stats here from NFDA about the high rate of cremation, and we have to be mindful of that in terms of making sure those people are still creating obits, because it's important in general.
I want to unpack something Kim said before. Two things. First of all, self-serve and private party, right? Kim, you and I have attended a few conferences where we talk about cultural shifts within the operation, where someone, I hate to say this, but someone is just so scared of turning things over to self-serve because they're scared it means their job's going to go away or something like that. How important is, in today's digital world, that you allow people to put the stuff in on their own without having to dial a number and talk to a human being?
It's incredibly important, Mike, for a couple reasons. First and foremost, we live in an on-demand society. Every single person on this call attending has probably purchased something from Amazon, quote unquote, after business hours. The other thing I would say is certainly this isn't meant to put anybody out of their chair, because if a private party puts in an obituary or a funeral home uses it for self-service, either way, at some point in time, someone needs to verify the death, so that we're not getting fake obituaries. This is a highly sensitive and highly emotional topic. And so there is never it may not take as many people or take as much time, and we'll be able to offer much more attractive layouts and make them available 24/7, 365, just like Amazon. But at the end of that chain, someone is verifying the death if it's not coming from a funeral home. So private party does not mean someone's out of a job. It just means we just need to adjust when the obituary can be published so that the newspaper person has time to verify the passing.
Precisely, or you lose that business to some other place. I don't want to say business. You keep correcting me, Kim. This is not about making money. This is about you lose that critical content, which of course will affect your bottom line. Michael, you called this, when we were going through the pregame, the death chart. Do you remember doing that? I actually wrote it down. But you got to understand, Michael, you're younger than me. I'm a baby boomer. This scares the hell out of me. But what we're seeing here is a trend. Okay, I've lived and had titles and been a talent. Remember, I came from radio. I started as a disc jockey, and I was a morning man in a number of cities and well-known. I was on a board of directors and I've lived in most probably 11 cities. Michael, going through your pedigree there, you've lived in tons. Kim, you said something else about multi-markets. That's what the generation that is going to be passing over the next 2 decades isn't just putting an ad in one city. Do I have that right, Kim?
That's correct. And well, or they might be, their children might be putting the ad in one city, but then they're thinking, oh, well, Facebook will do the job of letting people know where mom and dad worked or what school they went to. But the reality is things, whether it's Facebook, Snapchat, Instagram, whatever different social media platforms are being used, the reality is an organic post, that means something you just type into your Facebook and hit the post button, is seen by maybe 10 to 40% of your friends list, possibly even less. And particularly if you don't have all of mom and dad's friends on your friends list, it's even less likely to be seen. So there actually are so many great tools out there, whether it's putting multi-market ads in through our memoriams product, where you can say, hey, I want mom to be in the New Haven Register, but I also want mom to be in the Fort Lauderdale Sun Sentinel, and I don't want to retype it. That's a really important piece of the puzzle, but also be able to say, not only do I want those things, but I want it to go to, Dad did his internship at Memorial Sloan Kettering, and he was in a fraternity at UC Boulder, and these different things, these different aspects of a person's life. Things like Facebook offer targeting, so you can put in the age and all of the demographic and psychographic information, employment information, military service, schools attended, hobbies like cycling or rock climbing, to actually find the related people that knew your loved one and cared about them. And that's been a tremendous boon. Both Sally and Michael participate in that program along with a lot of other newspapers, and they will tell you the feedback from the families is very touching because it reaches so much further than any one Facebook post or any one print obituary. It reaches the global community around the loved one.
Let's circle back to Stouffer, if I may, sir. You mentioned you have a friend as a funeral director, and there are so many different ways this content gets into our products, and your company obviously is helping to be that conduit through the funeral directors, through the private party, through someone calling it in, and we have to type it in. Let's shift our focus to that critical human being, the funeral director, the human being that meets with the person during this incredibly tough time. How educated are they in these multi-cities, these generations? Who are these critical people that are helping this content find its way into our products? And how are you serving them through your company, if I may ask, or how do you stay on top of their trends?
Look, at the end of the day, they're just people too, like the rest of us, right? And so they understand these trends like everybody else understands these trends. I think the challenge, the extra care we have to give funeral directors is they're very busy serving lots of needs of a family when a family comes in their door. And so the things we talked about earlier about making sure that we make it as easy as possible for them to be able to, help the family, for instance, with creating an obituary and submitting it to a publication, it's even more critical because they are encumbered by so many things that are going on. I cannot tell you how many times this particular funeral director has called me because we know each other and explained that the newspaper that he puts obits in has restricted the deadline times or made it harder for him to actually place an obituary in the paper. And he says, I send tens and tens of thousands, I think it's probably hundreds of thousands actually, dollars of revenue to the paper, and they just keep making it harder, Stouffer. Can you please help, right? And so our role is to help bridge that, with the newspapers and help our partners understand these needs. And we just have to be better and better. That's why, going back to the earlier conversation about iPublish and AdPay, it's not just that, it's even more, but that was essential to get this intake thing right, because they're just people too. And going back to what Kim said, they order stuff online all the time. It should be as easy to publish an obituary as it is to, order takeout or order some shoes or do the other things that they're doing online. And oftentimes it's not. So I think that's how I would characterize the funeral directors.
And I know you have people that in your company, Stouffer, they're committed to simply serving that industry. I mean, you've got to serve them, then you have to serve our industry, the media industry. But let's talk to our two guests here from our industry now. Sally, do you go out and meet with these funeral directors locally that influence so much revenue? There, I do it again, Kim. Don't slap me down. Content. I mean, I'm an ad guy. I still look at the bottom line first, but the content is critical. So what are you doing as outreach at your organization with these people?
I think the education goes both ways, to be honest. I think there's a lot of educating that we do with the funeral homes. Certainly we do trainings, lunches, but there's a lot of educating we let them do with us on what their obstacles are, on what they're facing, on where they're losing business or losing dollars. And hopefully it's a combined effort between the two. One example I would use is the self-entry. In your normal process in a funeral home, they usually have an idea of, the obituary is going to cost $500, whatever, and I'm going to build an obituary that kind of fits to that mold. When you have somebody building their own obituary, they'll use twice as many pictures. They'll put in twice as many paragraphs. When they're building it and it's creating right in front of them and they see that Facebook post all ready to go, They don't say no to any of it. And it usually costs twice of what it would have had the funeral home been doing it. So one step we're doing is actually talking to the funeral homes about setting up a center within the funeral home where their client can sit and create their own obituary right there on the spot, that's sponsored by the Deseret News. Sit down, create it, see what it looks like. Let's do this hand in hand, because that's a tremendously hard thing for people to do. That's the part people dread about funerals a lot of times, is writing that obituary. How can we make it easier?
Michael, what are you guys at Advance doing to outreach to these customers? Like, let's call them what they are. They are customers that we have to service.
Well, since I do have a title that says sales, and I'll be a little more unabashed about it. This is a major revenue stream for us, and we look at it that way as well. And I don't think there's anything particularly wrong with that. And I look at the funeral homes. I look at the directors. We look at them as our sales force. They are our front line to the customer. In most of our markets where we're centered a bit more Midwest and East Coast, we don't have significant private party in the same way we do in our West Coast. It's a different story for our Portland group than it is for, our New Jersey group. So for us, it is getting in there, meeting with those funeral homes, working through them. Things like when we rolled out the Facebook product, we did webinars. We worked with, Kim Safran worked tirelessly to help us prepare for that. Webinars, conversations with those funeral directors. We even did one kind of globally with our partners at Legacy to really get out there and let them know that we're working on their behalf and we appreciate what they do for us, because they are, again, oftentimes our frontline sales force, our front forward group that's really talking to the families. We don't do it in the same way in most cases. So for us, it's education, it's outreach, it's golfing. We have somebody that probably golfs too often with Dignity Memorial, right? That's okay. We're fine with that. It's building that relationship. I would say this, look, in some of our markets, we have, one of our larger markets in terms of volume and revenue, we have a 90% adoption of self-service at the funeral home level. 90% of our obits come through self-service. That's the highest in our market. We have others where we have more of a white glove approach with a traditional kind of call center that handles those obits. But that, you don't get that kind of adoption without a lot of outreach. And frankly, we've also partnered with Legacy to go hand in hand. There's resources there. There's a great resource, John Heald, who we partnered with, who came into markets with us, and we went door to door with our top funeral homes and the ones that absolutely were not participating with us, and talked with them, had those conversations. So we take that very serious and really have, I think, established best practices across our markets. I think our Alabama group, for example, has tremendous relationships, goes out on a regular basis, sits down, talks to those funeral home directors. Without them, we're in trouble. And that's the big concern with some of these trends we're talking about when you look at cremation, where it impacts the bottom line for the funeral homes.
Let's talk sales then with Sally. Sally, during the pregame, you flipped out Michael because you said, well, we just sold out a sponsored content for a year. And Michael started taking notes and going, what did you do?
We're launching next week, by the way.
Sally, again, I know this is not about money. This is about saving the content in a critical conference. Let's talk money again with you guys, because I was very impressed with this product. Why don't you talk us through it? I'm going to put up some slides, if I may, and share them with the audience, but give me a second here, because you know how it is on Zoom to get everything ready to go. But this is your memorial pages, right? How did this evolve?
That's right.
How are you monetizing this puppy?
So again, focusing on obituaries being a standalone. That's something we kept going back to. The content is king, and how do we make the obituaries a standalone? So that's the direction we decided to go. Thus the memorial pages that will include not only the obituaries, but editorial, advertorial that you can buy that goes in that obituary section. It of course has to be complimentary. We're very picky about that. But if I'm a client that wants to put something in that section they're going to get a full page in that memorial section. They're going to repeat that online as a native article and be featured as one of the top 3 articles of the day on the front page of our website. It also gets shot out as a sponsored article on our Facebook pages for the newspaper, creating readable, desirable content that falls right before those obituaries that keeps it very respectful and in tone of what you want it to be.
I'm very impressed because you said it sold out in a month for the year.
Very, very quickly. All we had to do was say it and people jumped right on it. So, I mean, Michael will probably shake his head to this. Everybody asks to be in the obituaries. And in days of past, I mean, we just don't let ads go into the obituaries out of respect more than anything. And any page could have fallen before those obituaries, whether it be jobs or legal ads or something very uncomplimentary. So our goal right now is to do a standalone with complimentary articles and complimentary features that fall with those obituaries right prior to them. So it's all in good tone. And it's been a favorite.
And was the sales process outbound? Was it, how did?
It was outbound, and I didn't even have to create a sales sheet. For those of you that are on this call, that are creating a sales sheet for everything, it became a topic, something we sampled one time and then talked about that people immediately jumped on and went, well, I want 5 weeks. I want the next 2 months. And we certainly mix it up. We don't want it to be the same sales article over and over and over and appear that way. We want it to be desirable content. So we have been a little bit picky, but our problem hasn't been finding people to be on it for sure.
How about the cost to create that content? I know you have a content department in your digital services wing, but it was all, there's profit here, right? There's
definitely profit. I mean, we have ghostwriters that write the articles. We 99% of the time prefer to write them, so we know that it is going to be respectful and not just a sales pitch in general. And all of that is figured into the cost. And the surprising part is cost is not the issue. Cost hasn't become the issue. It became the place where I want my content. So I'll pay whatever you want me to pay in that spot. The same is said to be true for obituaries. When it's all done and sitting in front of you, cost doesn't become the issue. I'm going to pay for my Facebook ad because it's just done for me. So it's all about providing somebody a done, finished product that's easy to buy.
There you go. All right, we're getting near the end of our journey, and I would like, again, our audience to please get into the chat room, ask any questions you want. Obviously, Sally, you got a bunch of people taking notes right now going, Michael's already taking it to market. But let me just make my 2 cents here, because of all the data we're seeing now and all the information out there, sponsored content is an amazingly important critical category for us to be leveraging right now in a myriad of different levels, including obits. But if you don't have a content machine going right now for small businesses or medium-sized or large businesses in your market, start one. Michael, I see you nodding your head, but you agree with that.
100%. Yeah. When Sally mentioned this, I literally sent notes to about 5 markets with examples, and thank you, Sally, for sending it along. But I just think this, leveraging that's something that other competitors are not doing. The fact that we are a content media company is so critical, and it's something that differentiates us. And I 100% agree that, whether it's this vertical or others, it's something that we need to be owning and really developing.
All right, so as we got just a few minutes left, let's talk about the future.
Mike, can I throw one thing in really quickly too?
By all means, Kim.
Thank you. A lot of folks on this call are Legacy.com affiliates, and I just want to make sure that if you haven't ever gone to sales.legacy.com, I urge everyone to go there. There is a ton of excellent end-of-life memorial content that is respectful, and you are allowed to use it if you are a Legacy partner. And I mean, there's wonderful articles written by professional journalists, edited by professional editors. So that's available to all Legacy partners at sales.legacy.com. So I encourage you to go grab and look at some of that content. It doesn't have to all come from internal.
That is an amazingly good resource to have. Stouffer, you have my congratulations. I had no idea that you were offering. See, again, I'm learning constantly through these webinars that we host. You have turnkey content that your customers have instant access to, that you can take to market.
Yeah, no, that's correct.
This is amazing.
It-
All right,
it-
so we got
Go
a
ahead.
few minutes, we got a few minutes left. We're nearing the end of the journey. Let's talk about the future. Let's talk about it. Okay, what tools right now do you have, Stouffer, that you'd like to make sure that everyone knows are available? Maybe reiterate or go over again, so we can all make sure that we're where we have to be in this critical space, and we're still there in 10 and 20 years. I mean, we're not just, right now putting a Band-Aid on it, but we're fixing possibly revenue and content that we were losing. And what are you providing as a benefit to those media companies to stay in the game?
Yeah, so look, it's a combination of our self-serve tools, the content we provide. Quite frankly, there's a whole nother conversation about how we're helping help content reach users who, Sally made an interesting point earlier. She said, we need to be everywhere people are looking. We're actually trying to take things even one step further and help the obits find people who didn't even know they were looking for that obit through some of the network of sites we're building to help reach our users on behalf of our newspaper partners, right? I think rather than trying to give you the exhaustive list, Mike, what I would say is the following. Going forward, first of all, it's really uplifting to hear, people like Sally and Michael and others as sort of passionate about the category and realizing how important the category is. It gives me hope that that's half the battle, right? I mean, Michael could have given the presentation on the trends, right? He knows them just as well as we do because he studies the category, right? And Sally's idea of having funeral directors use some of the self-serve tools, hopefully that we're providing, to let funeral homes let their consumers place the obits directly is brilliant, right? Because she's seen the impact when a user gets to use those tools. Here's what I would leave you with, though, from Legacy's perspective. I'd go back to what I said about if you were a publisher today, what you should be thinking about, right? It's two things. It's like, how do we make it as easy as possible for funeral homes and consumers to submit obituaries to the newspaper, remove the obstacles, educate them, make it as easy as possible. And secondly, how do we make it as easy as possible for everyone to discover this content, thus reinforcing the newspaper's role? And I think what I would say is, seek out the best practices on this, go to the white paper. In terms of the ways we can help, they are there. And I think that's the best advice I can give rather than trying to knock them off one by one. But also remember this, just as I said, I was excited earlier about I had a spring in my step to be able to talk with smart people about the obituary category. The team at Legacy loves it when any of our partners say, I just want to talk about obituary. Can we spend an hour talking about obituaries? I've got some questions and thoughts, right? It makes our day. And so take advantage of it, because it's not just me who wakes up every day thinking about it. It's the rest of the team, and take full advantage so we can talk about the unique challenges that you're facing and how we've seen them solved, or ideas we have for solving them, and the tools we might be able to provide. And that's the best advice I could give in terms of thinking about the category.
All right, Michael, I'm going to give you a chance to give some thoughts to an industry that you and I both know can sometimes be hard to change and hard to shift, because you've had many years in different markets, different companies. What advice would you give to a publisher right now who is sitting on the fence saying, the classifieds are dead, I'm not getting back into this stuff? What advice would you give to them?
Oh, yeah, and thank you for the opportunity. Listen, you can't sit back and manage down this segment, right? You can't sort of say, well, we're not going to invest and we're just going to manage through it and we're going to ride it out. Because, I jokingly was saying the other day, one of my jobs at the Pioneer Press was dealing with the audio text, which was largely based on personal ads that were in the newspapers. And that was a great revenue stream. And I can tell you that's not there anymore. These things disappear. You need to get involved. You need to have a strategy. I can tell you this: 17 million impressions on Facebook were served last year with advanced brands. And that's our new brands, not the newspaper brands, things like NJ.com. 17 million impressions in the markets were served through our Facebook product. That's a huge, huge way for us to educate the audience and train them that we are the digital future for obituaries. We do that through the traditional organic. We do it through the paid. And people looked at me and said, "What? You're putting paid? You're putting an obit in a paid position on Facebook?" And I said, "You're darn right, because we're going to reach the right people. We're going to reach." We reached 2 million of additional Facebook users who wouldn't have come to our sites. I mean, this is the kind of strategy that's going to make sure that we're not sitting back on our heels, hoping that things don't change, because they're changing. They already are, and we need to get involved. This is not the time to sit back and hope that things get better.
And it takes a lot of different legs of the stool to finance our core competencies, which is generating news. And why, if the business is there, let's just let's just skate to where the puck is going and do it right. Sally, your final thoughts to the publisher out there right now that needs to be cajoled into taking this a little bit more seriously.
Well, I don't think I could have said it any better than the last two gentlemen have said it, but I would leave it with the final thought of pay attention to trend and be the trendsetter. There are so many out there scared to change. I get calls every day asking me about the things we do, and I say the same thing. You have to change with the times or you'll be behind. So don't be afraid to change, set the trend.
This is when I usually do one of my favorite expressions. How many psychiatrists does it take to change a light bulb? The answer is one, but it has to want to change in the first place, if you think about it. So that's where we're at now. Kim, I'm going to bring your lovely voice in, if I may, because you have put together a massively cool resource site. I've seen you've already chatted out the URL to the group, but you might want to stick it out there again. What would I find if I go to sales.legacy.com/webinar 2022? Kim?
Well, what you would find, I'm sorry, I was on mute. I was trying to listen to everybody. And first of all, great comments in the chat. I already have been taking some notes on some ideas, so you all will be hearing from me. But if you go to sales.legacy.com/webinar 2022, what you're going to find is a copy of this PowerPoint presentation, a copy of a white paper that was written not just for sales managers, but for editorial directors who care about local content as well. It talks about the 4 trends and the 6 solutions and ideas for dealing with those trends in much more detail. You'll have information to contact Michael or Sally. You'll also have a copy of the NFDA cremation and burial report, some links to Forbes, and some other things that we use to actually gather all this data. So you can also go to sales.legacy.com without typing /webinar 2022 and find an enormous amount of resources, including that content I was sharing that Russ at Advanced Local was happy enough to share, but he uses it all the time and loves it. So thank you, Russ, for that. So definitely check out this site if you haven't. It's a wealth of resources, and please do follow up on Stouffer's suggestion. Ernie, Bob Birkenthal, Ron Speechley, myself, we're all here to help in any way we can. James Allen, to really try to make this as easy as possible during this massive time of change.
I should also mention that a recording of this webinar will be available to all who registered. We'll be sending, and those that attended today will get an email in the next hour or so to the recording once we render it. And I'm hoping you'll put it up there on this resource page as well, Kim, so others can share from the good group. I want to thank all of you. Very, very strong content here. Amazingly, I guess, game-changing. And that's what I really love about doing these webinars. Michael, you're a good friend of ours. This is your second time that I sat you in the seat. Thank you so much for your contribution. And I want you to stay warm up there. I know you're getting some interesting weather. Sally, you're one of my favorite parts of the world. Did you know that the Ogden Standard Examiner was my client for 15 years? So I used to come through your area all the time. Wonderful people, amazingly, just great place. And I'm assuming, Sally, if someone wants to head out in your direction, you'd like to give them a tour if they can, or at least see the facility.
Definitely. I would love to.
And of course, Stouffer, stay warm in your windy city there. And Stouffer, I was joking with you before we started. You're one of the few people I know that actually does not have a green wall behind you. That's a real beautiful view of your office right now, isn't it?
Yeah, it helps me monitor the pace at which the downtown Chicago loop is returning or not from the pandemic. So we still have a ways to go.
All right,
Good-
well,
good
thanks,
vantage point.
thanks to all for this great content. Thank you for all for attending, and watch your inbox for a link to the recording. Everybody have a great day and stay healthy, please. Take care now.
Son, I'd like to know that your love is a love I can